Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Board Connect Forum on Effective Board Engagement, brought to you by the Center for Non-Profit Leadership, CNPL. My name is Hanif from CNPL, a part of National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, NVPC. Conflict among boards in non-profit organizations are expected. While board members of diverse backgrounds come together, solid convictions to serve, there are often differences in opinions. As such, we're bringing to you this forum to share insights into the life cycle of charities and the different levels of engagement required, board engagement metrics, and board engagement strategies that work. Before we continue further, I'd like to request your attention to some of the administrative matters. All attendees, cameras, and microphones will be switched off during the webinar. There will be a video and audio recording on this forum. Please use the Q&A chat functions to comment or post questions. The presentation deck will be emailed to all participants after the forum. Thank you. I shall now start the webinar by inviting Mr. Desmond Chin, Commissioner of Charities, to give us his opening address. Mr. Chin, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's really my pleasure to join all of you this morning. These last few weeks, I know must have been very difficult for all of you because the demand for your services would have likely have been on the rise due to these heightened measures. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you and your staff for your dedication in providing these services and caring for your beneficiaries. I would also like to thank CNPL for proactively organizing such webinars for our charities over the many years. CNPL really provides very excellent programs for charities to tap on, such as its board match and pulse check, which are created to help charities strengthen their leadership capacity. Now, this morning is your effort in continuing to upskill yourselves in your roles and responsibilities over your charities. I'm very encouraged to see so many participants signing up for today. We will hear and learn from industry veterans such as Ms Theresa Goh, who's very entertaining, Mr Yap Chee Meng, who is as entertaining, Ms Ellen Lee, whom I've known for a long time, and Mr Abdul Rahman, whom I have just met but will know very well soon, for their views and on effective board engagement. Now, let me just touch a little bit on board engagement. In my view, that an effective board is really one that is a team and that works well together and that endeavors to use individual skill sets and expertise to lead their charities forward. It is therefore crucial to always bring in the right members from the onset, not just people with passion for the charity sector, but as importantly, with the necessary skill set to complement one another in that team. An engaged board is characterized by one that has a strong partnership with the executive director and his or her management team. Now, where there is collaboration and mutual respect, the work of the charity forges ahead unimpeded. But where there is disunity and where there is infighting, the charity will soon lose its direction, it will lose its focus, and it will lose its ability to deliver on its mission. Our beneficiaries will suffer, and everyone becomes poorer for it. The relationship between the board and the management team must therefore be guarded jealously so that they can work well together and deliver on the charity's vision, their mission, and their objectives. When board members are fully engaged, they become our best ambassadors who will improve our charity's governance standards. They will watch our internal controls tightly, they will safeguard our assets, and they'll potentially bring in more partnerships and donations for that charity. And last but most importantly, they will also continue to attract good talents to join our charities. I would like to speak briefly on three areas because there's no shortcuts in building a strong board that is engaged. So I'd just like to share some ideas for charities to consider. First, charities need to invest time in our board members, both as a whole, meaning as a board level, as well as individual level, meaning at individual board member level. Onboarding our new board members through a proper induction process is a must. So therefore, we should equip them with sufficient knowledge of our charity that they are serving on so that there is vision and mission alignment. An ignorant and non-aligned board member can be a nightmare for the executive director and his team. Now, we must also help our new board members understand their fiduciary duty, their specific roles and responsibilities, and their accountabilities. Too often, I have seen individuals sitting on boards who are totally clueless of their fiduciary responsibilities. Such persons are really a grave danger to the charity. And I need to remind all of us that being ignorant of our board duties or of the law is not an excuse for wrongdoing. We can get into very serious trouble if we do not take our board responsibilities seriously, both at the charity level and as well as at the individual board level. So please, I would like to appeal that we all educate our board members well so that our charities can continue to thrive and that they can continue to do well. Now, thirdly, getting our new board members up to speed quickly is the smart thing to do, as you will then help build their foundational knowledge so that they are able to participate in our board discussions at a deeper and more effective level with the rest of the members. So try to bring them on stream as soon as possible, and that's the reason why we need to educate them. Now, I have noted from Touch Community Services Limited 2019 annual report that this particular charity has a very good induction program for its new board members. And the program includes the briefing by the CEO on operations and strategic plans of the charity. They give very good organizational information to new board members, and they touch on governance and legal matters which are critical for board members to know. They also touch on board responsibilities and the requirement to attend relevant board training. This is indeed a wise investment of the charity's time. It's also something which I would like to encourage all charities to try and do and to emulate. Go and look at their website, you'll see what I mean. The second area I'd like to talk about is interaction. Having regular and meaningful interactions with our board members, keeping them up to date on the latest charity happenings is crucial. This can be done, perhaps not now, but when the tightened measures are lifted slightly. This can be done through meetings, phone calls obviously you can do, and luncheons. But some ways to help our board members and the management team connect at both professional level as well as at personal level. But interactions must work both ways. Board members themselves should therefore proactively reach out to other board members as well as the charity staff so that we can gain better insights to the mission, the people, to the culture of the charity that they have agreed to serve on. Apart from physical meetings, there are other ways to keep our boards informed. For example, Tai Hua Kwan, moral charities, often update their website and social media with stories about its programs, its beneficiaries, and its employees' achievement. This therefore keeps the public and the board members obviously updated. An informed board will then share these stories with their friends, with their own families, and with their respective work groups, and therefore they will be your best ambassadors for your charity. Excuse me. Now, thirdly, the charity needs to also take time to acknowledge our board members' time and effort. Our board members are made up largely of volunteers who have deliberately set aside time from their busy schedules to serve on that charity. Many do not seek recognition, but that does not mean that board members do not need encouragement. So some charities, I know, have shown their appreciation to board members in very innovative ways. Let me give an example. RSVP Singapore, the Organization of Senior Volunteers, has an interesting page on their website for staff and board members to write personal messages to those whom they want to give thanks to. These messages are really very heartwarming, with special mention of the staff and the board members by name, acknowledging the good work that they have done. So I can well imagine how much this means to the people that are being acknowledged, and all of us need encouragement from time to time, including board members. So do encourage your board members if you help them to go far, because they have given up their time and their precious time to serve on the charity. All right, the Charity Council and my office are committed to supporting all the charities in your journey of excellence. I'd just like to highlight two very quick resources that you can tap on I've mentioned this in previous webinars, but I thought since we have over 300 people with us, I better mention it again. Otherwise, my staff, Kelly, is going to kill me. All right. The first is the Code of Governance. Now, this is found in the charity portal. The Code of Governance is a very useful document that sets out our best practices that charities should aspire to in terms of its governance standards. You can keep to the Code of Governance, you will not get into any trouble, and you will thrive. So I would strongly encourage all of us to use this Code of Governance to build and to strengthen our boards for our charities, so that one is engaged and is effective. The second one, I would just like to quickly remind and just update everybody is this thing called the BWO, Charities Capability Fund, otherwise known as VCF. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this. You can tap on these grants to strengthen your charity's governance, your digitalization journey, your cybersecurity, and your donor management efforts. MCCY is working together with Tote Board and NCSS to develop the technology hub for the MTOs to accelerate the sector's digital transformation. Some of you may know because it's been mentioned in Parliament, but I think I'd like to repeat it. This will include technical advisories that you may need, the digital implementation consultancies that some of you may seek, your digital strategy planning, if you are thinking of doing it, as well as adoption of large-scale specialized IT solutions that I know some of you are embarking on. So this service is targeted to be available in July this year, which is just next month. I think the funding details will be shared in due course, so please do look out for it. Now, this morning, we have spoken on the importance of our boards and the criticality of board engagement and what we can do about it through the investment of time, through closer and meaningful interactions, and through inspiration and encouragement of board members and the staff of charity as well. If we can do these well, we will help to shape and create an engaged board for all of us. Henry Ford once said, "Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success." And this is exactly what an effective board must do together with its charity management team, to come together, to keep together, and also to work together, so that together they can deliver on their shared mission and the shared vision. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. I wish you a very good and panel discussion and also the sharing by Theresa later. So let us continue to work together to build a thriving and a trusted charity sector. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and a weekend ahead. Thank God it's Friday. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chin, for the wonderful opening address. Next, I will move on to the main presentation. Today, we are privileged to have Ms Theresa Goh, Council Member of Charity Council and Governing Council or Member of the Singapore Institute of Directors, to give us her presentation on effective board engagement. Theresa, over to you, please.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Hani, for the introduction. And thank you, Commissioner, for summarizing my 30 minutes presentation in your 15 minutes speech. Yeah, nevertheless, I'm very pleased to be here. And thank you all 196 of you for making time with us this morning. Today, I'm going to talk about effective board engagement, and I'm doing this on behalf of the Charity Council. And as I was looking for a picture to illustrate what board engagement is all about, the word flow kept appearing in my mind. Flow. Board engagement must be about flow. It must flow with the strategy of the charity. It must flow with the work plan. It must flow. The board members must flow with the management and staff of the charity. So then I started looking for a picture that depicts flow, and this is what I got. Yeah, because when I look at it, it gives me a very, just serene, everything in place, everything in line, despite all the chaos and tensions that might be happening, things just move along. Yeah, and everybody grow and learn as a result. Next chart, please. So board engagement shouldn't be engagement for engagement's sake. Yeah, so we do have to start with the end point. what is the end we're trying to achieve? It's really to become an effective board. And of course, the way boards engage has a large part to play in the level of effectiveness that the board achieves ultimately. So from the Singapore Institute of Directors, we define, I wear another hat as, with the SID, and we define effective boards as one that balances the conformance and the performance of the organization. Yeah, so when we talk about conformance, and COC has mentioned it earlier, it's not just about adhering to the Charities Act or the Code of Governance or any other policies that is mandated by the sector administrators, or even the kind of products and services you belong to. For example, if you're providing health services, there would be many policies and acts that you have to adhere to. It's not just about that, and the Commissioner mentioned earlier, it's also about really understanding your fiduciary duties. What are your duties and liabilities as a director? Yeah, and what does fiduciary duty really mean? What sort of liabilities are in place if you misbehave, as well as how do you actually project independence, accountability, and transparency in a way that you're not just following the law, but you're following the law of public opinion. You're also following your conscience, yeah? Not just sticking to the law for sticking to the law's sake. It's sometimes doing the right thing can be a bit gray. So board conscience is just as important in the area of conformance. As we talk about performance, and again, CSC has mentioned earlier, it's really about having clear mission, strategy, work plans, goals that the charities are trying to achieve. Short-term, medium-term, long-term are very important. So alignment will happen when the direction is clear. If the direction is not clear, alignment cannot happen. And when direction and alignment is clear, commitment will happen. Yes, so it's these three things that has to come together: direction, alignment, and commitment. Ultimately, what is it about? Is it about just meeting your goals? Perhaps for the private sector, profitability is something most commercial companies will go for, but they are also moving into stakeholder capitalism. So for the charities, it's really about creating value, not just meeting your KPIs. You could be meeting your KPIs and duplicating what many other charities are doing. You could be leaving gaps in society and nobody's creating value there. So performance is really about that as well, not leaving anyone behind. Okay, and an effective board is also a board that balances the two. If there's too much of conformance, you become a controlling board, and that's not good. If there's too much of performance, you will be a laissez-faire board, meaning you're chasing whatever you want to chase, regardless of what the sector needs, what the nation needs, what society needs. You're just chasing after goals and objectives for your own sake. Yeah, so an effective board is really about balancing the two, and the challenge lies in balancing the two. I know many charities are achieving either conformance or performance well. It's really balancing the two that is important. Next chart, please. Now, CNPL has given us more substance into what is performance versus conformance. Yeah, in the CNPL Board Governance Survey in 2020, whereby more than 350 charities were interviewed. And this is based on your input. This is Singapore input. This is your input. This would be your friendly, charitable board input, all 350 of you. And the framework that came out of the input is this: 3 different dimensions of board effectiveness, which really entails a lot of engagement. Yeah, in each of the boards, there it entails board engagement. So the first one is about dynamics and culture. Yeah, the kind of board members you have, are they aligned to the values and the motivations of the charity? How is the board and management relationship? And what is the aspired board and management relationship? The second basket is about strategy and role. Yeah, strategic foresight, role clarity. I won't touch on that. But the third one, interestingly, which I circled, is called active participation. And it really shoots the arrow directly at board engagement. Yeah, so the consciousness for board engagement is surfacing. Yeah, 10 years ago, if I talk to a charity, I don't think this will appear in the framework because there were many other fires to put out. But I think the charity sector has matured to a certain extent that board themselves are pinpointing that active engagement all the way is very important. Yeah, so it's something to really pay attention to. Now, the third area is structures and processes, pointing to compliance and governance, and the age-old topic of board composition, diversity, and renewal. Yes, and I believe that more attention will be paid to board composition, diversity, and renewal. Okay, so hopefully this gives you empirical evidence that engagement cannot just happen by accident. It has to be very intentional. Yeah, and there is an art and a science behind that. And hopefully within the next 20 minutes, I'll be able to share some tips with you. Next chart, please. Context is important. When you talk about board engagement, there's always a spectrum, yeah, under engagement, over engagement. And we should not start saying, hey, over engagement looks like this, under engagement looks like this. We have to look at it in the context of the charity. Yeah, and Singapore's over 2,000 charities are very, very diverse. Yeah, diverse in size, diverse in culture, diverse in so many, worldview and, values and motivations. So I picked this chart up because it depicts the life cycle of the charity from startup to, closure. Yeah, for example, my personal experience when I co-founded CNPL more than 10 years ago, we were a startup. Yeah, and ultimately I became the chair of CNPL. I remember myself just folding up my sleeves and my board as well, all working, putting in a lot of time. And we were going into CNPL 3-4 times a week just to create the programs together with the 3 staff that we could afford to hire at the time. So would you call that over engagement? No, we were actually engaged at the right level for a startup. Yeah, but as we move into the growing stage, the infrastructure development and the funds started coming in, and we started to procure training programs. We automate some of the things, we built databases, and we managed to hire more staff, but not enough. Yeah, we were doing some of the work that management was doing. Yeah, would you call that over engagement? Not so, right? Because we're in the growing stage. Now, when we got into an impact expansion stage, meaning your programs are starting to produce impact and outcomes, and the assumption there is all the resources for the charity are already in place. That's when the boards really have to hands off, yeah, and just look at the strategic stuff and let management drive the operational stuff. All charities will get to a stage of the 4th one, the stagnation stage, whereby the mission that you set out to achieve, the needs that you set out to fulfill among your beneficiaries is no longer there. Yeah, which means you are already successful in what you set out to do. Yeah, and also it becomes a red ocean. More and more charities are coming in to fulfill the same services. Yeah, and in some space we know they are over servicing. So then the board will have to decide, do we cut down the programs, close the charity, or we renew our mission? What do we do? And go back to the growth stage again. This all requires a lot of engagement. And at the decline stage, it is a rectifying board. Yeah, the boards will have to relook at, past policies, past mission, past strategy, and start to make changes. Yeah, and there is a certain level of engagement, but maybe not as much as in the growth and beginning stage. So do we say that the board is under-engaged? No, I think that would be the right level of engagement for that life cycle of the charity. And of course, if the charity decides to dissolve, then you become probably a rectifying board or a rubber stamping board, yeah, just to fulfill all the closure requirements. And board starts to move their attention elsewhere, even outside of the charity. And do we say that board is disengaged? No, it is the right level of engagement. To repeat the point again, let's look at the next chart. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the life cycle of the charity will determine the kind of board you are at. Yeah, if you're a startup, it is all right to be a working board. If you are in the growth stage, it is okay to be a managing board. If you're making impact, you must be a governing board. Yeah, so the line between strategy and operational must be a bit clearer. If not, you are intervening, you are interfering with what management is doing, and you become a micromanaging board. And that's what you don't want to do when you are a governing board. Now, on the right side, whereby board engagement comes down because of the life cycle, you could be an out of control or rubber stamping board if you are disengaged when you're supposed to be governing. Yeah, so I do know of many charities which are highly funded, and they say, oh, there's nothing we can do because our funders already asked us to commit to these KPIs. So they become a rubber stamping board. I would call that a disengaged board if they are supposed to be governing and they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, let's go to the next chart. So let's talk about what is board engagement. Engagement is, well, there are many definitions, but this is the one I like best, yeah? Whereby engagement goes to the human nature of boards. Yeah. In truth, all the board members are individuals who come together collectively to try to achieve shared goals. Yeah. So to understand engagement, we have to go to the root of it, which is the human nature. Yeah, so engagement is about the level of intellectual, physical, and emotional commitment. So I'm talking about how board members think, how board members act, as well as how board members feel, which results in the level of engagement they have to the charity. So whoever is responsible for driving engagement would do well to really understand the basic foundations of engagement. Engagement takes many forms, yeah, such as financial contribution. Yeah, some boards I know give money directly. Some boards participate in fundraising activities or even creating the fundraising strategies. That's a really good form of engagement. It's also about meaningful presence at board meetings. Yeah, I use the word presence because before COVID came in, I hear many board members not being able to attend board meetings because they were traveling all the time. Yeah, I've seen board members who skip all the meetings. Yeah. So what is the conclusion there? Is he or she not performing fiduciary duty? I think that's arguable. Yeah, board members who can't attend meeting could be contributing in other forms. But after COVID, I think we have less of an excuse not to attend board meetings. If we start to travel, say by the end of the year or next year, because technology has enabled us not to give that excuse anymore. So I deliberately use the word presence. It could be a virtual presence, but as long as there's a presence, it can be very meaningful at board meetings. Community ambassadorship, yeah, how you appear in events, community events, ribbon cutting or making speeches. All these are ambassadorship responsibilities of boards. Stakeholder door opening, this is very important, especially, I would say even the charity sector is pretty competitive. Yeah, there are many charities running after the same funds. Yeah, stakeholder door opening is not just related to government funding or grants. There are lots of private sector and also even philanthropic bodies that have come up with innovative ways of fund giving. So boards will do well to engage in the emerging innovative ways that philanthropy is moving towards. A relationship, of course, is very important, not just internally with management and staff, but also externally with a whole range of stakeholders. Now, personal development is also an engagement. More and more of you are attending board training and development and mentoring and coaching, and that's a wonderful thing. So I deliberately put it there because there are more and more institutions also offering board development, such as CNPL, SSI, and Singapore Institute of Directors. Yeah, so we have a clear definition of what board engagement is. Let's move towards the next slide. whereby I will really want to spend a bit more time for you to understand the human nature of board. Yeah, when you look at the boards as an individual, yeah, every board member has personality and competencies and values. Yeah, and a combination of it will decide the level of engagement that the board is comfortable to embark on. Yeah, then we move to the interpersonal engagement. That's important also, because all the small parts add up to the big part, which is the collective board. Yeah, how a director relates to one another. I'm sure you have incidences where two boards, just don't like each other because of personal reasons, or just have huge professional disagreement over how they see things. Yeah, all these are cracks that can derail board engagement. It's really important to also look out for interpersonal relationships between board members, also between board members and committee members, and between board members and chairperson. Yeah. And thirdly, we move on to how directors work together as a board internally in the boardroom. And we're touching on the topic of board dynamics, all the unseen and unspoken dynamics that is in the boardroom, which could result in sound decision-making or poor decision-making. Yeah, and not just in the boardroom, how about management who are not ex officio of the boards? Are they clear about what's happening in the boardroom, the kind of decisions being made? Is it cascaded down to management, to middle management, and to the frontline management? That's truly important as well. This is not to say board must get to there, but board must understand whether the chief executive or the ED engage downwards into the organization. And lastly, engagement is also about directors responding to the external ecosystem. Yeah. And usually we will talk about, hey, what are the other charities doing? What's the expectation of sector administrators? But my challenge to boards is actually you have to really look at what's happening politically, geopolitically. You have to look at stakeholder activism, that you look at the environment, and you look at how people are looking at integrated reporting. Even in the private sector, yeah, it's no longer about profits, it's about triple bottom line. What is the impact on that on charities? And now even triple bottom line is not enough. We're talking about 6 or 7 types of bottom line reporting. What is the impact on charities? All these are things that directors need to know and engage, because the impact might not be immediate, but certainly 3 to 5 years down the line, you will feel the impact on that. And you don't want to lose the opportunities and understand the risk to your charity. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So why is board engagement important? I will just go through this chart because it's rather self-explanatory. Yeah, it definitely increases value creation for the charity. Yeah, if your donors are getting more and more sophisticated, they're not just giving you money to create a program, because a program takes care of known problems. Yeah, with COVID, everybody is knowing that, hey, problems are actually not known. Problems are invisible. What is the next crisis? Donors are interested in those kind of things where problems are not known. Yeah, so how do you increase value creation for the charity? It's to tell your donors, we are not just doing programs. We are future forward, we are a very strategic charity, and we are looking at problems that is yet to come and probably preventing them or preparing ourselves for them. Yeah. The second point is about improving governance in the boardroom. We talked about that. Better PR, it's very important. Now with social media, how many charities are moving away from traditional media and using all the social media mechanisms to attract talents, to basically just market all the good work that you do effectively. Yeah, and Commissioner talked about more about talent recruitment opportunities. Yes, if the boards are engaged, ultimately people will say, hey, this board is very special because they are synchronized. They have a consistent message. They are happy with what they do. They seem to be a very fulfilled bunch of people. I want to join them. Yeah, so like bees to honey, that's what board engagement does for you. And of course, more donor confidence. I won't elaborate on that. Next slide, please. So what does individual engagement look like? So we know that boards are human beings. We are affected by the way we think, we act, and the way we feel. Sometimes boards themselves are not conscious of the level of engagement that they have and what it looked like to other people. Yeah, at the very foundational stage, a disengaged board member would look to others like, why are you so blurred? You know, you seem to be unaware of things. Yeah, okay, if you're a new board member, fine, you have the excuse of being unaware. But if you're a board member who has been around, but skipping meetings or not really paying attention during meetings, clicking on a handphone all the time, not reading your board documents, you will look like you are an unaware board member. Yeah, so besides being disengaged, the management and staff are actually questioning, does the board really know what we're doing? Yeah, so you want to move out of the stage as soon as possible. And how do you do that? You ask questions, yeah, you move to the next stage, ask questions, yeah. Some people ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Some people ask questions because they really do not believe in the underlying philosophy of what the charity or the program is doing. And some board members do it because they just disagree with how things are being done. Yeah, so that's fine, yeah, but it is okay. A visible resistance is fine. It's when you keep quiet that nobody knows what you're thinking about. Yeah, so resistance can be a good thing. When all your questions are answered or all your options are being put forth and, and being considered and yet probably not taken, but there is a collective agreement to agree to disagree, a board member could move to a neutral zone, meaning, okay, the board may not agree with everything I say, but I respect the collective. So it's a neutral zone. Or you could be supportive as an individual board member. And a supportive board member simply doesn't mean I say yes to everything, but really asking the management, what else can I do for you? What do you need me to do? Who do you need me to connect? How can I help in fundraising? Yeah, that's supportive. Now, leading would be the ideal state whereby boards are involved in a social process, board members are involved in a social process to influence each other towards shared goals. That's what leadership is about. It's about a social process. There's this dimension of influence, and there's this collective movement towards shared goals. Yeah, so the engagement looks like this, and there are lots of empirical research that has been done to prove this. Next slide, please. So put all the board members together, and this is how board engagement looks like. The level of involvement at the bottom, from low involvement, from being unaware to being a leadership board, and on the vertical dimension, from contributing low value to contributing high value. So the ideal stage would be the green box, yeah, whereby boards are leading, meaning they are being involved together, yeah, and they are also adding high value to the charity. So here it says that you're a high value, highly engaged, effective board. Yeah, on the flip side, low involvement and low value means you're a disengaged board. Yeah. Now with boards, it's interesting. You can have low involvement yet high value, right? So for example, if you're a very, very influential board member and you bring in $10 million in a span of 3 months, you're not very involved. You just make a few phone calls, but those are powerful phone calls that brings you so much value. I would say it's a selectively engaged board. It's a good board, but it's not a great board. Yeah. So you always want to move towards a green board, which is a great board, a flourishing board, a highly effective board. So I hope you get the drift of how board engagement looks like at the individual level as well as the collective level. Let's move on to the next slide. So signs are that your board is under or over engaged. I won't go through this point by point. Again, it's quite self-explanatory. Yeah, this engaged board would be one where there's no more ideas, everybody's passive, fundraising is not really happening, there's absenteeism, lack of preparation and meetings, lack of promotional efforts, and there's delay in delivering commitments. So if you're a board member who say, I'll do something, but you keep, the management keeps having to remind you, the chair keeps having to remind you, or other board members are having to remind you, then these are signs of disengaged board. So look out for it, And again, let's put it in the context of the life cycle of the charity. Yeah. And over-engaged board, too many ideas, too many meetings. I wonder if you have sat in such meetings before. I have sat in such meetings where, wow, the 10, 15 board members have 30, 40 ideas. At the end of the day, the management team looks worn out. They look lost. They don't know what is the prioritization, and they're too scared to go back to the board to say no. Yeah. So an over-engaged board has many, many implications towards how the management team perform or not perform. Yeah. And of course, the way over-engaged board will end up in micromanaging or even protection of the mission. I've come across charities which cannibalizes other charities. Yeah, because they are so much into the success of their own charity, they start to eat up the small ones. Yeah, and that is not the ethos of a charity. So watch out when you're over engaged to this extent. Yeah, and I talked about management having too much burden to account to the board. Yeah, watch out for this. Next slide. So who is responsible for driving board engagement? Yeah, the million-dollar question. Can I have a poll to find out what the audience think? So I'd like you to answer this question by choosing one option. Who do you think is responsible for driving board engagement? Please click on your option. So if the poll is completed, can you just share with us the results? It's okay, there's no right or wrong answer, just put in your option. Wow, 77% of you say the chair is responsible for driving board engagement, and 23% says that the CEO. Well, okay, I shall close this poll first. Well, my research, yeah, and it's all across the world, says that the common thinking is that the chair drives board engagement, but the truth is the CEO must be driving board engagement. Yes, the chair is supporting, is guiding, is partially responsible, but the driver behind board engagement is the CEO. One of the very practical reasons is the chair is there only for a certain period of time. Yeah. In the charities overseas, the chair only had tenure of 3 years. Yeah. Here in Singapore, we have tenures between 8 to 10 years. I do know there are exceptions. Usually the CEOs will outlast the chairs. Yeah. So for continuity, that's one of the reasons CEO should be driving. Somebody asked what driving means. Driving just means that you get the results of achieving board effectiveness through board engagement. Yeah. So you have to work along with the chair, but who is the owner? It's very important to define ownership, because if the chair thinks the CEO owns it, and the CEO thinks that the chair owns it, then we're just playing chicken and egg responsibility passing on to each other. So if there's anything you want to bring home from today's presentation, is that the CEO is responsible for driving board engagement. And I will give you some tips on how to do it. Of course, the chair will have to work with the CEO. The other reason why the CEO is responsible is because the CEO understands all the operational ongoings with the charity. The CEO understands the programs. The CEO will understand what sort of events is suitable for which board member. The chair doesn't know all this. If the chair knows all this, then it's a working chair or a managing chair, and that's not the ideal situation we are moving towards. Next slide, please. Are we moving to the next slide? Yes. So one of the first thing I would advise the CEOs that are listening in is to know your board. Yeah. When you start to know your board, you will start to understand your board. Yeah. And with understanding, you will be able to exercise wisdom in assigning different engagement activities to different board members. Yeah. The first thing you want to do is to have a board engagement assessment matrix. Yeah. So this is a typical stakeholder matrix, and it's definitely applicable to boards as well. Yeah, name all your board members on the left-hand column, and just intuitively indicate where are they in their level of engagement right now. Yeah, and you can use whatever you want here. Current engagement is indicated by the letter C. Yeah, so you can put C all over the place, and you also want to put D where it should be. So in a way, the CEO, you yourself are aspiring, for my board members, where are they now? Where do they want to be? And then you can create a plan to help them to get there together with your chair and together with your board members. The plan is owned by the board. The CEO drives the creation of the plan. Okay, so let's talk about clarity of roles. So this is a very straightforward stakeholder engagement matrix. Do it with your chair. Yeah, and both of you with your joint observation of your board members, I'm sure there will be some sort of agreement on where the C is and where the D is and what needs to happen to get to the desired state. Okay, next slide. Yeah, and this is another dimension of the earlier dimension of my earlier chart where I talk about involvement versus value. You want to look at the interest level of the stakeholders for your charity to move towards high performance and high conformance against the influence and power of your board member. Now, this chart talks about how the CEO should be managing the particular board member. So if you have a board member that has high power and high interest, you want to engage very, very closely. Yeah, because this board member is a key player. Yeah. On the flip side, if you have a board member with low power and low interest, this board member is not important. You don't want to spend too much time on this board member. In fact, you want to start thinking about how to exit this board member. Yeah, and that's where your succession plan, board appointment, and renewal comes in. Yeah, for board members who are very interested but not much influence and not much power, show consideration to them. They are very passionate, and that in itself deserves some gratitude. Yes, show consideration, keep them informed. Yeah, as they become more experienced, their influence and their power will grow. Yeah, and for this box where board members are high power, low interest, meet their needs, keep them satisfied, consult them. What's important at the chair level is not to show favoritism. What's important at the ED level, the CEO level, is really knowing how to leverage your board members. Okay, so what you want to do is to map your board members here. Yeah, just put your names intuitively, work with your chair, put A, B, C, D, E, F all over. Then you will intuitively know how to approach your board members in order for them to be more engaged. Let's move on to the next slide. My final chart here, tips for CEO and chair, communicate. Yeah, so CEO, have frequent conversation with your chair, know your board members, shape one behavior at a time. I know your job is very busy, you don't have time. You can have lunch, coffee with different board members per month. Yeah, so by the end of the year, you will cover all your board members. Yeah, and make sure to connect in between meetings. Commissioner talk about having coffee and tea. Just make sure, because empirical evidence has shown that socialization is important towards positive governance of the board. Yeah, of course, too much of it may not be healthy. Too little is also not healthy. Always in moderation. Now, align a diverse engagement plan to strategy. This is where the CEO has to own the plan. Yeah, I can talk later about how I did it in SATA. with my CEO to create a engagement plan and how we engage every board member. Make assignments relevant to board members. Remember, they have different personalities, different competencies, different motivation. Give them activities that they are interested and motivated to do. Be very specific on tasks and deliverables. Don't just tell your board member to turn up. Tell them exactly what they are to do and tell them what is the objective and what are the takeaways that you would like from them. Yeah, this is your opportunity to delegate upwards. And a CEO who does it well gets also respect from the board member as well. And like Commissioner say, recognize the engagement effort. The last but not least, and to me, this is the root cause of over-engagement or under-engagement, right? Is you must pay attention to how you select your boards, whether your boards are evaluated, feedback, and what is the board level satisfaction, as well as social interactions. Okay, so this is a CAB template for you to start working on your plan. Final slide. So I'm not going to talk about this. This is a question I'm going to ask you. Now that you know about board engagement and about the different diversities of board that needs to make engagement happen, your next board member, if you have a next board member that's like Napoleon Bonaparte, and he says, you can ask me for anything you like except time, what would your decision be? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Now, I'll be handing over to Mr. Keith Stanley, who heads the NVPC Center for Non-Profit Leadership. Introducing the panelists, Keith will also be moderating the panel discussion. A gentle reminder to all participants to enter your questions via the Q&A chat function. Over to you, please, Keith.
Thank you so much, Hanif. And once again, thank you so much, Theresa, for sharing with us this morning. We shall now move into the panel discussion. And this will actually be a great opportunity for all of us to pose our questions. As what Hanif has mentioned earlier, we invite you to post your questions in the Q&A chat function. All right. So of course, this morning, we will definitely have Theresa with us on the panel. I already saw that some of you have started to post questions in the chat group. Well, we do not want to direct all the questions to Theresa because this morning, we also have with us on this esteemed panel, Mr. Yap Chee Meng, who is also a charity council member. We will also have Mr. Abdul Rahman Bakar, who is from our Mosque and our Malay Muslim community, also a fellow grassroots leader. And of course, Ms. Ellen Lee. I believe she's no stranger to us. She also sits on multiple charity boards. So before we begin, maybe let's invite our panelists to give a short introduction about themselves. Over to you, Mr. Yap. Mr. Yap, you have to unmute yourself first.
Thank you. I was an audit partner for many years, involved in leading services to MNCs. So the best thing out of that would be the opportunities I get sitting on attending meetings, watching how people interact. Last few years of my working life, full-time working life, was as the Asia Pacific COO for an international accounting firm. So that involves with dealing with the big boys, small boys, and so on. Nowadays, I sit on boards, both non-profit and commercial. Non-profit would include Esplanade, newly minted charity council member. I sit on SETS. I chair Exa's insurance business in Singapore, and I chair RHB asset management business globally. So I guess the examples I want to give so that you can know me better would be what is one thing that makes me really sad and what is one thing that makes me really happy. So recently, one of the saddest moments was when we had to retrench a lot of non-Singaporean staff at SETS because of COVID and because we want to protect the jobs of Singaporeans. So it was really sad. People working with us for 15, 20 years, we had to let them go. And that's why I selected the background. You know, if you look at my black and white background, you find that that's actually a weed, and I call it COVID. It is to empathize with people who are really suffering right now. The happiest moments, quite a number, but the most memorable would be the smile on the face of the older people from hospices, whom Esplanade invited for complimentary free shows. How happy they were. You know, it can really bring tears to your eyes. I guess I stop here in case I talk too much, but thanks really for inviting me to share. Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Chee Meng. Well, definitely we will ask you to share because you have the whole wealth of experiences behind you as well. Maybe let's hand over the time to Abdul Rahman. Rahman, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kitson. I'm the honorary chairman for Ansar Mosque Management Board. But at the same time, I'm the general manager for East Mosque Cluster, overseeing about more than 200 board members in the 18 mosques within my church. It has been a journey. When I first started 20 years ago being board members, I learned a lot. My mentors were the seniors, right? Because they have wealth of experience. And then after 20 years, I realized that, yes, they are still important, but the millennials now are my mentors. Reason being, they taught me a lot of things which I do not know. That shows that I'm growing older in one way or another. Yeah. But today, I think I'd like to thank CNPL for this opportunity because it gives me the platform. I think I would not be able to share much, but also to learn from the many the panels who have wealth of experience, and also from the participants who will be asking burning questions, which I think in itself will be a learning experience for me as well. So, Kitson, I pass to you back.
Thank you so much, Rahman. No worries, you're always as humble, right? We will also ensure that questions will go your way, Rahman. Let's turn the time over to Ellen. Ellen, over to you, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ellen Lee. Thank you very much, CNPL, for this invitation. It's a learning process for me actually to hear from all of you what board engagement is all about and how we could outperform ourselves actually at most of these boards, which are actually quite diverse in itself. I have been a practicing lawyer for the past 40 years, and within the 40 years itself, 10 years was spent as a member of parliament for the Sembawang GRC Woodlands area. And most of the other time concurrently, I'm also sitting on a number of VWOs and NGOs with some charities like the Singapore Table Tennis Association as a president, as the president of Silver Ribbon Singapore, and then as legal advisor and board member of the Nanhua Opera, and then also Mingzhong Sports Club and a host of other temples and clubs and associations. All these have given me actually an insight into how people react and behave within the responsibilities that are given to them, and they are very, very enriching. So I look forward to sharing with all of you what you have to share with us, as well as what I could offer by way of my own perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I believe that many years of experience, there will be also equally as many questions that we pose to you this morning. Well, once again, fellow leaders, we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A chat function so that we are able to pick up these questions to pose to our esteemed panelists. Now, to begin this chat, there's always a very interesting question. I mean, we heard from Theresa this morning, but maybe let's hear from the rest of panelists. What does board engagement really mean to your respective organizations? And, you know, all our panelists sit on different boards. Maybe let's hear from Chee Meng first, shall we? Yeah, because you have both the for-profit and the non-profit, So maybe let's hear from you. How does maybe you can shed some light, any differences between profit, non-profits, and what does really board engagement mean to your organization? Chee Meng, please.
Okay. I think the important thing to know is that have the theory there in terms of responsibilities, engagement, how to do things. That's always important. In practice, it's an art. So to me, if you ask me to address the issue of engagement, I would say the ability to extract the usefulness of each member of the board. And this would apply to both commercial and non-profit. It's really an art. If you need a more engaging board, and sometimes you do, it depends on the stage of maturity of the organization, then so be it. If you a less engaging board, then you move more to the qualitative aspect of things. But it's an art, and it is an art that is quite crucial to extract and maximize the experience from board members. Don't just give up on board members lah. That's what I'm getting at. Know how they can contribute and extract value from their presence before you move on to rotation. In fact, before you accept them as board members, you would have really gone through the process of what you need, who you want to invite, so on and so forth. So I just stop there and pass it on to the next one.
Maybe let's hear from Ellen.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. To me, board engagement actually means that you serve and do what you have joined in the first place. The reason for joining a board is because you are interested in certain things and you want to achieve a certain purpose. So therefore, when you join that board, the fundamental is that you must really put your heart and soul into it in order to help that organization grow. Because all of us have got this goodness in us that we want to help others. And that's why we need a platform to carry out that purpose in that sense. So joining the board to help, joining a group of people actually that shares the same vision and mission as you do, and also having to subsume ourselves to all the others within the board. I think when we join any organization, it is important that we are not there as I, we are there as we. And therefore, it would be necessary for the purposes and the missions to be understood. Everybody comes to the same consensus as to what needs to be done, how to go about doing it, and carry it out effectively. And I think the involvement of the board actually also involves ourselves not putting our own interests above all the others. Because once we come into a community as a group of people working together, we should be working towards a common goal and not for our own personal agenda. I think that's all that I have to share.
Thank you, Ellen. Maybe let's hear from Rahman.
He didn't mute himself. He didn't unmute himself.
Rahman, you too.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Maybe I give a bit of background for the Mosque sector. For the Mosque sector, the appointment of the board members is actually through an open advertisement where we invite those above 21 to join the board. The process includes interviews, coffee session, and so forth. But at the same time, we have that critical mass of our past board members who will be holding the key appointment holders. So when we have new board members, that's where every 3 years when we have the appointment, right, the dynamics may change a bit. And that's where this is going to be a very fundamental principle that we hold on to. That means we will try to get the engagement of everyone, but at the end of the day, the engagement from everyone will lead to how do we create impact to the community. Because everybody will come in with their own sets of agenda, possibly. They may want to actually fulfill certain wishes that they observe the organization, in this instance, Mosque, that were not done. They wanted to do that. By the end of the day, the board has to come together, and we will have to discuss in the best interests of the community, and actually to create that impact on the community. And then to do that, I think the board has that role to lead or guide in terms of the strategic and program planning. And at the same time, for me as a general manager of East Mosque Cluster, usually what we'll do is that we will also ensure that every reappointment, the board are being strengthened and then being regenerated as well as being rejuvenated, so that we don't remain stagnant and in order to meet the ever-changing needs of the society. So in essence, we need to extract the best out of the board so that we can give the best and impact the community. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Rahman. Theresa, maybe you have some thoughts on this as well?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I spent 30 minutes explaining board engagement. So I hope it's not just for entertainment, but that you will internalize and actually apply it. And I've been looking at the questions as my fellow panelists was responding. And yes, there's a lot of contextual questions, and Kitson, of course, I'm sure you'll be asking. It is really about leveraging your strengths of your board. Yeah, every board comes with strengths and weakness. Yeah, and of course, being human beings, we always want to look at how we improve on the weaknesses. Yeah, and how do we leverage the strengths? Yeah, so a wise CEO working together with a wise chair will move in that direction. Yeah, and when we talk about leveraging strengths and weaknesses, it's not just going after tangible goals. I fully support Ellen, whereby it's really building the soul of the organization. Yeah, there are inherent goodness in all boards, all management, all workforce. It's really, how do you engage to the extent that the board member is manifesting the soul, not just the responsibility and the duty, but manifesting the soul. And Chee Meng said it so well when he talked about going to the senior home and, you know, really joy of seeing how the seniors are uplifted. That's really talking like a soulful board member. And that's what you want your board members to get to a level whereby in the boardroom, you don't just talk about data analysis, financial. Yes, all these are important. All these are a given. You have to do that as a board member, no excuse. But you want to go the extra mile and say, yeah, let's really talk about how do we cultivate the soul of this charity. After all, we are a charity. We should be about the soul. Yeah, and how do we transfer that soul to our beneficiaries such that they love being serviced by us? And not only that, they change their own behaviors. They take empowerment of their own situations and work towards improving their own situations themselves. Yeah, so this can be contagious, and I think a highly engaged board can be contagious. Thanks, Kitson.
Right, thanks, Theresa. Yes, we heard a fair bit about having the heart and the soul. We heard from Chee Meng that also talks about it is an art to manage, you know, this really engagement, as well as Rahman also mentioned, is bring out the best. Well, fellow panelists, you know, you have been involved for many years, and you know the whole business about doing good. So what really irks you? I think this was one very interesting question. You know, what really irks you and what really inspires you to want to continue serving on boards, especially when you do have these engaged board members or overly engaged board members. Anyone like to share? I can see Ellen all prepared. Yes.
Yes. If I may share, without any reference to any particular organization, I think when it all started out good, you know, when everybody comes together, and then you have new board and old board and things like that. And I feel that if anybody starts to feel disengaged with the board, it is best that they leave the board rather than stay on and start to create negativity. And sometimes negativity may not be manifested in any particular way, but through body language, through words that are been said, through negative responses that would affect fellow board members, especially when certain board members do not realize that persistent questioning may actually be perceived as attacking board members, or even the chair for that matter, or even the staff for that matter. So I guess, with all good intention of wanting to do good, we must also watch what we say when we are at board meetings and when we are outside of the board meetings as well. How do we portray ourselves? And I think that consistency in image is very, very important, because you are what you say you are. And if you want anyone to take you seriously, then you must behave accordingly, because any flippant remark, anything that is said which may be perceived otherwise by anyone listening to you will be bad image actually for the board itself. And it is so hard to build a board or build any organization for that matter, but it is so easy to cause damage by just a flippant remark, or anything that is said unthinkingly. So I think it remains for board members to be always conscious of what we are saying and how we behave actually in public, because you may, like for us, we wear so many hats. Sometimes we forget, that in the public, some members of the public will recognize us, and an unthinking word and unthinking gesture actually cast doubts already, in the minds of the person who has observed you. So it is something that I think we will have to consciously be aware of. Thank you, Kitson.
Thank you, Ellen. Yes, I think Chee Meng wanted to say something.
No lah, you want me to say something, I'm gladly share on this thing called what upsets me. I want to link it to something else which is important. What upsets me is board members having a lack of understanding of the mission of the organization. And understanding the mission of the organization, what we are trying to achieve, is so very important. Otherwise, how to be board members? Because along with that flows the other responsibilities. So I put it down to how you create board members in the first place. So I think the key here is to ask ourselves whether we have a program of identifying the right people. Here I'm speaking from experience on Esplanade Board and working with MCCY. How to identify the right people, then how to actually persuade them to come on board. That is very important. If they come on board because of obligation and not because of desire, then you do have a bit of difficulty there in getting them to understand the mission. Then of course there must be some sort of a whether formal or informal program in place for them to uplift their learning curve, but actually during this time instill in them what you want in terms of engagement. And then of course, even board members have retired, the really good ones, you want to retain contact with them because they can be mentors to the newer board members. So if you do this bit right, then it's very difficult to do so. Then you find that it will be less upsetting at board meetings and less things irritating you, because everybody can move broadly together in the same direction. So I just stopped there.
Right, thank you so much, Chee Meng. In fact, I like the part that you mentioned about, the board recruitment process. I believe that's critical. And in fact, we have a question in the chat as well. Quite interesting. What would you say is the best combination of board members for a charity? What different roles should they be playing? And what kind of commitment should we expect from board members?
Yeah, this one I must come in and add my 2 bits. And I hope Theresa and Ellen would fully agree with me, as well as Rahman. When you target for certain board members, I do notice that the auditors or ex-auditors and the lawyers, because of their training, you know, to tell people what is right, what is wrong, or to produce report, they have less hesitation in sharing their views. So you ought to have some of that in there, I suspect. The right balance, you know. Then there are some who are really very good at the soft skills aspect of it, and there are some who are really good with the fundraising aspect of it. And these people can actually add value. Chairman and CEO will need to work a little bit harder, I suspect, on the average, to prompt feedback from them until they settle down within the board, which is why I said, you know, and I hear Theresa kind of agree with it, is very important to identify the right people. And when they come in, to be able to extract value. And after that, they become your so-called flag barrier, you know, as they become more experienced. So again, I will stop there and let others have a chance to add on.
Okay, I can add my few cents worth. How your board, who makes up your board and what kind of roles do they play is dependent on the mission of the organization. So you cannot look at it in silo. You really have to start as what is the charity trying to achieve? Yeah, and not in the next 12 months, not in the next 3 years, not even in the next 5 years. You really, as board members, you got to look far. You got to look at 10 years down the line. Okay, and you cascade back to your short-term strategy. Then you look at, based on your strategy, what sort of competencies do you need? What sort of personalities do you need on your board? What sort of motivational level of values should your board have? So it's a pretty structured thinking. And this assumes that you are clear on what your mission is. If you're not clear on your mission, any board member will fulfill the requirement, right? But if you're clear on your mission, you know specifically what sort of skills would be needed on your board. And of course, every charity is an organization. An organization has already functions, different functions that at the very least need board oversight. So when Chee Meng talked about finance function, investment function, HR function, these are all typical strategic oversight that you need over your operational day-to-day matters. Yeah, so those are what I call the conventional board competencies that is needed. Now I want to focus on the unconventional ones. Like for example, everybody is into sustainability. So what does your charity do? How do I find somebody with sustainability experience in my board? This is what I mean when boards have to look outside for the big trends, the mega trends, the geopolitics. Yeah, and everybody's looking into diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Do you have somebody like that with that kind of experience on your board? Yeah. Even doing good, right? CSR, reaching out to corporate donors, reaching out to the new philanthropy. Do you have somebody like that? Yeah. And if somebody only knows fundraising and do not know about all these new trends, fine, just send them for training. You can invest in your board development as well. So you must be clear on what your vision, mission, strategy is before you even talk about what sort of board members should be composing your board. Then you cascade down into how you interview your board members. You want to interview in such a way that you draw all this. You want to do your reference checks. In SATA, I did all this as the chair of the nominating committee before I became chair of the board. I was doing reference checks on all my board members. I was doing a diversity matrix to tick all the different checklists to ensure that I have a balanced board. In the interviews, we talk about values and motivation. Yeah, so we do what we call structured interviews. We also do interviews that project the board into uncertain situations so that you're able to analyze whether your board member is one that can work with uncertainties. Yeah, because everything ahead of you is uncertain. So it is an art and a science and also a structured process that goes into creating your new board. If you want more information, there is a board appointment guide, which was written by myself wearing the SID hat. Kitson was also part of it. Center for Board Diversity was also involved. And I can't remember, I think Ernst & Young was also, it's online, just Google it, yeah. It's called Board Appointment Guide. It gives you a 30-page process into how you can form your board and followed by how you can structure your board. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Theresa. Maybe let's hear from Rahman, because we heard from Rahman earlier on as well that the Mosque clusters do have a different way of appointing their board members. So in this process, what really irks you, and let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Kitson. I think for the mosque sector, the last decade has been a change. Previously, we see that there was a trend where the board members are aging very fast. Every 3 years, most of them, no regeneration and so forth. So when we actually started to embark on this program of regeneration, when we meet people with expertise, one of the key challenge they actually raised to us is this: I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I'm busy. Some of them may still have young families, or they are busy flying around. They say, I don't have the time. So that actually shaped, or I think make us rethink the way we appoint board members. So that's where, like what Theresa mentioned just now, it's not just about physically being there in events and so forth, but how they actually give their inputs to help make better decisions for the organization. So based on that, I think we revamped the way we do the engagement. True enough, we still need the people with different expertise, but also like what Chee Meng mentioned, the art. When we do the interviews, I'm not sure, I will have to read Theresa's book, but we actually put them in situational environment where we will see whether they have that flexibility or that ability to help make decision, not only in the area of their expertise. And that become a bit challenging. Many made it, but some cannot make it because they are very stuck with their way of thinking, or some logical thinking and so forth. So when it comes to gray area, they're a bit difficult. Yeah, so that's one. But for most sector, one thing we realized that the composition, we have to bring in the millennials, even though they are still young, because as a place of worship, specifically, these are the people that we worry in 10, 15, 20 years may forget us, right? So that idea of smart mosque, virtual mosque, they will have many of the ideas. So that's where we need that component, even though they may be very impatient in moving and making a lot of changes. Then there's another small group of people that we always want to have in the board. These are the seniors board members. They may not be strategic in terms of their thinking, but they are the face of the mosque. Yeah. Why? Because for mosque, you have congregants coming. They are used to seeing the face of the mosque. So these seniors usually will play that part where, in one way, they will be also like the feedback point where congregant can come to give feedback, and they also will share. So we have that small pocket of the millennials or the youth, the seniors, but majority will be those with the expertise, so that they can help to shape and bring forward the mosque to the next level. For your information, for the mosque sector, we have our mosque convention every 5 to 6 years. So that will actually include all the new changes in the society, in the nation, or the global trends, where we will actually set the direction or the strategies for the next 5 to 10 years. So to implement that, that's where the expertise will come in. And I thought it is working, but we are still fine-tuning and still finding ways of how to make it better as we go along. Yeah, that's all, Kitson, for now.
Right, thank you so much, Rahman. And of course, we can hear from all our panelists, it's really about finding the good mix, the very, very best composition. But then there's always this question that we find people are keen to be like us. And I guess that's a question that one attendee actually asked, is really, how can board avoid groupthink, especially organizations with a lot of respect, or maybe too much, I see that in parentheses, are accorded to the more senior board members. So how do we actually avoid groupthink? And then maybe let's hear from you.
Okay, let me try on that. I think groupthink is not necessarily a bad thing, actually, because especially when you have a chairman who is very enlightened, very experienced, and who does not have tunnel vision, actually, and who is able to be impartial, who is engaging, and who is able to convince his board members that, you know, whatever that has been put onto the board for consideration, for adoption and things like that is actually a good thing to do. Of course, there's always the vote taking. You know, if you don't agree, you know, we can always ask for a vote to be cast to see whether or not, you know, there is a majority decision to go along with it. But otherwise, I think it is something for the chair actually to periodically evaluate whether or not his ideas have always been taken on without questioning. If it always happens, maybe should really critically examine whether it is because he's too overbearing, too overpowering, or that, you know, he gives the impression that he knows everything, you know, or is it because, you know, people generally thought that it was a good idea. And the diversity, I always believe that the diversity of the board itself will prevent group thinking, actually, because we have moved to a stage where, especially charities, COC will be looking into it as well, into each charity, because you are getting funding to make sure that the board functions in that sense. And we have to submit annual returns, we have to submit annual reports, we have to submit applications for grants and things like that. You have to set up your plans and things like that. So I believe this is one way to check whether or not, you know, there's too much group thinking within the group itself. Thanks, Kitson.
Right, thanks, Alan. Now, besides groupthink, there's also the issue sometimes, you know, that board members may not have the courage to speak up, especially, you know, when you have that close circle of friends that endorses every board agenda. So somewhat like groupthink, but, you know, do not have the courage to speak up. Yeah, so what's your thought on this, especially during the decision-making process? Chee Meng, I see you're ready to answer.
No, I was just thinking of group thing. Maybe I can contribute going backwards. This thing on group thinking. I don't necessarily agree that group thinking is good. In fact, it might not be so. I mean, I'm a chairman, right? I like to think that I know everything. But one thing I really look forward to is to engage an external consultant to actually do an evaluation of how the board has performed during the year. And, you know, getting feedback from individual board members in order to revamp it a bit. And that tells me whether I'm too dogmatic, even though I know I'm good, you know. So it, again, is an art. But one other thing that we can also do in terms of making sure that group thinking can become effective as opposed to being a barrier would be to have fairly regular briefing by experts in areas. And very often after the briefing, you see some views open up a bit. You need the chairman to obviously be in agreement. So going back to the fundamentals, both chairmen as well as the CEO equivalent, very important. But we need to have group thing evolve into something that can add value as opposed to taking it on a one track. And sometimes engaging independent people coming in, you know, on a complementary basis, hopefully, because we are non-profit, might be able to overcome some of the so-called barriers on group thinking. So again, I stop there.
Yeah, I can comment on it because my background is in organizational psychology. Groupthink is an unconscious bias. So the people who are group thinking do not know they are group thinking in many circumstances. Yeah, which is why different board members must learn to call it out. Yeah, and I'm really against board favoritism. Yeah, if my chair is showing favoritism, I will call it out. Yeah, of course, you do it in a nice way where, you know, privately as well. Because many times the chair doesn't even know he's displaying favoritism. Yeah. So our own assumptions limit the things that we say to other people. Yeah. So we assume that, oh, people know their group thinkings, and the truth is many people do not know. So we have to call it out. And I, for one, do not think that groupthink is healthy for the boardroom. So I agree with Chee Meng there, because groupthink really, really undermines innovative thinking and also the appropriate challenge at the appropriate time. So it goes against the fiduciary duty of the directors, and it's unconscious, right? So again, directors do not know that they are not fulfilling fiduciary duties because of something called groupthink. So as a board chair, I would advise, if there's a tendency for groupthink, just because the recruitment and the selection of board members have been bringing in like-minded people together, then you want to have somebody assigned the role of a devil's advocate. Yeah, get one of your most articulate member of the board and say, hey, you be the devil's advocate, which means you challenge for the sake of challenging. Yeah, and that will wake all the board members up. Yeah, that is a proven scientific way to diffuse groupthink. Yeah, the other way is to talk to your board members about groupthink. Yeah, and believe me, once they know about groupthink, they will stop group thinking because they are aware of it. Yeah, and Kitson, you talked about psychological safety, right? Why do some board not speak up? I think this is where, again, recruitment, you have to uncover the value of the board. Yeah, if the value of the board is just to please the chair, then or to get to know the other board member, the hidden agendas are important. If they are really there to serve the charity, which ultimately serves society, then their passion, their competency would actually make them speak up, challenge, and support during board meeting. Yeah, and if they're doing it because of psychological safety, then as a chair, who understands board dynamics, I would call out the board member, yeah, and say, hey, what do you think, Mr. XYZ? You've been quiet, let's hear your view. Yeah. So the onus lies on the chairperson to manage the board dynamics in the meeting itself, which means that we need an experienced chair who understands about human nature and human dynamics and interpersonal and group skills. So it is a lot of things happening, yeah, and of course there is no perfect board. Yeah, every board is working towards that level of perfection, and no board ever get there.
Kitson, if maybe I can add a bit, Kitson.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean what Chee Meng and Theresa mentioned are very real issues, I think, especially when we are leading a group of board members. For once, I know that groupthink is very good if you just want to get things done very fast. Yeah, but there's this tendency where, if not careful, the board will become like a rubber stamp only, or worse still. What I see the other aspect is this, especially when you have new board members, even though they are professionals, so they have area of expertise, even though we do the induction program for them, but when they first join in and they look at how the meetings are conducted, some of the feedback we receive is that they felt that they are inferior. They don't dare to speak up because they thought that all the members, the incumbents, knows very well the stuff, so they don't dare to speak up. And when they don't dare to speak up, they will just then have this tendency to just follow whatever that has been proposed. So we used to have coffee, especially during the early stages, the first quarter or the first 2 quarters after the appointment. We used to have coffee. We will have coffees with this new board to check with them, to do a check-in. How do they find? And then we actually shared, and then they realize, oh, okay, in that case now I understand better. So this is, and that helps them. Then slowly they will grow instead of keeping quiet and just agreeing what has been proposed or agreed by the other incumbents. They start asking questions. So I thought that is important, like what Theresa mentioned. We need a bit of pain. We need a bit of pain, yeah, to actually make everybody start thinking and see things from the different perspective. But having said that, I think the other challenge, especially for chairman, is that how do we actually manage people of differing views? Do we actually label them straight away as somebody who is a difficult board members without even understanding? So this is another aspect which I thought, one, you have problem, people don't speak up or group thing. The other one is that if they start talking, how do you engage them? That will be a different level that as chairman or the one who lead the board will have to start thinking of the engaging them at a different platform to get the best out of them. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Rahman. So when we talk about the group thing, we talk about the courage to speak up, and then there's few questions out in the chat is regarding board appointments. And in particular, board appointments when, on SSA boards, when they are specially appointed, or certain founders that will recruit their friends onto boards. Yeah, so what are views on this? Because it seems that if these are appointed, would they be more engaged or disengaged? Friends, would they be more engaged or disengaged? Theresa, maybe you'd like to shed some light on this topic?
Most of the boards that I'm on, especially when they're related to the ministries, there will be board appointments because it's part of their part of the ministerial act that some board appointments must be done. And I see it as a good thing because it is really about engaging externally. So as a charity with somebody from the ministry, maybe PERMSEC, Deputy PERMSEC sitting, we give a view to the ministry on really what's happening in the ground, at the ground level, yeah. And at the same time, we are able to play advocates to them, perhaps to give these appointees real feedback from the ground, what the board thinks, so that they can advocate for change at the policy level. So I see it as a good thing. Whether they are engaged or not, again, depends on the board and the chair, right? So my favorite question is, Mr. So-and-so from this ministry, what do you think? Yeah. So, and you don't have to wait for the chair to ask that. The board members can ask that, yeah? And their replies will also make me understand from the ministry angle, from the civil service angle, what are their limitations, yeah? And the best thing that comes out of it is we agree to work together, yeah? The board, the charity board, together with the appointee ecosystem, we agree to work together and say, hey, change may not happen 12 months, 18 months later, but we will continue to advocate for change and hope to see it 3 to 5 years later. Yeah, so I think it's a good thing. It's not a good thing when they start to mandate. Yeah, and I've also experienced that. Yeah, so the PERMSECs come in and think they own the board meeting. So we have to call it out. Yeah, board members need to be courageous. We have to call it out to the chair and say, hey, what's happening? Who is running the show? Yeah, and of course, most chairs appointed at that level will have some level of wisdom to balance, right? You have to give respect to the people who give you money, yeah. But we are also not servants to everything that we do. Yeah. So a wise chair will be able to balance that. If the wise chair is not able to do that, I will call it out to the chair of the nominations committee and say, hey, something is going on here. We're not having healthy dynamics. Yeah. And if the chair of the NomsCom is doing what they're supposed to do, then yeah, the NomsCom chair will get conversations, constructive conversations around how behaviors can change in the boardroom. Yeah. So what does this point to? This point to you as a board member really understand what is your responsibility and your role. Yeah. Whether you call out unhealthy behaviors or are you just there to give input for better programs? No, it's a balance of conformance and performance. That's my first slide. Yeah. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Theresa. Would any of the panelists like to share more on your thoughts on this?
Maybe I can add, board responsibility about, ensuring proper governance policies, keep to the law, legal compliance, in other words, fiscal oversight, money issues, all this we know. There are a couple of other areas that are equally important, one of which Theresa has touched on, and that is within the board, especially when you are a larger non-profit organization, would be like what Theresa has said, directors who are representing certain community. In fact, it's their responsibility to represent those communities correctly, and it is the board's responsibility, the other members of the board, to make sure that they extract value from that relationship. And on Esplanade, I'd like to share with you, I can assure you the PermSec or Deputy PermSec on our board, they don't always have an easy time, but we all work together as a team because they know they represent MCCY correctly, and we get the benefit out of that because we understand why certain things are done and why certain things cannot be done. But meanwhile, we also extract value. So this is what Theresa means, not to be underestimated. But in terms of the smaller non-profit organization, I know it's so difficult already to get people to agree on serving on your board. So sometimes easy way out would be, hey, I talk to people I know well, and then you have this question about, many friends of the chairman serving on the board. Actually, there are no pros and cons, so long as the right attitude is there and so long as they can add value. The issue here is, can they add value? Are these the value that you want on a composite basis in order to have an engaged and efficient board? So on that score, it is always useful to have an external party coming in order to basically sit down with the chair to go through the list of potentials. We know it's difficult, having potentials is one thing, persuading them to serve is the other thing, and then you have to address the issue of, are they serving because of obligation or is that passion? All these things comes into play, but I just want to say that don't assume just because it's a chairman's friend that they cannot add value. I think the important thing is to go beyond that, but it is always useful to have a additional pair of eyes helping the chairman and the CEO to redefine the list before you approach people, to make sure that the fit is there.
Thank you, Chee Meng. Now, on this same topic, just, chairman normally has many friends. And, I think there's this question regarding, getting involved in too many organizations and what is the optimum number of positions. We know for the LISCO companies, encourage about 6. So what are your views for the non-profits and charities, since you wear a few hats, Chee Meng?
My contacts always say, Chee Meng, you got too many board memberships. The issue here is not the number. The issue here is whether you're devoting the right amount of time and fulfilling your responsibilities. I'm not one for wanting to set a number, but having said that, SGX is very particular when it comes to the commercial side, the number of directorships. And in certain list codes, within their own internal policies, they do have a number. So in other words, if you reach the limit, if you really want to add one more, the whole nomination committee will have to justify that. And normally they settle on a number of between 3 to 4 listed companies. The weakness there is that there are seldom list codes out there that actually set a number for non-list codes. And therefore, you can get somebody having to be the chairman of all the subsidiaries. He ends up with 16 directorship. I like to ask people to take one step back. I think it's good to set a number, but this number cannot be, you might not want to cast it in stone because, you can say, okay, I think the right number and we can adjust it as we go along would be, say, 4 or 3. But equally important, if we have to exceed it and give you the permission to accept, we need to justify it. And that way there are proper documentation on the thought process, which is very good for governance. So again, I stop there. My personal view is that for listed companies, 4 beyond which you really have to justify, and not only justify, you need to disclose in your annual report. It applies to non-profit as well, as whether it's 3 or 4. I think we have to leave it to each non-profit entity to decide. But I think it's very important, equally on the part of the person wanting this directorship, it is his or her responsibility to make sure that they can fulfill what is required of the role. And actually, they would have a hard time, if they're on 16 boards, for example. So again, I stop there. I know it's good to be more documentable and more independent review on this particular area.
Okay, and if I can add, I just completed an article called Strategic Leadership in Boards in general, whether it's LISCO, private or non-profit. And of course, strategic leadership is really about strategic thinking, strategic alignment, as well as strategic influencing, and also knowing your strategic intent, which means it is a lot of commitment from each board member to drive organizational success. Yeah, and in that article, which is coming out in the next SID bulletin, I've also stated that considering all this commitment and obligations of the board member, can you afford to be on more than 4 or 5 boards? Yeah. So somehow that magic number agrees with Chee Meng, the number 4. Yeah. Although I said 4 or 5. Yeah. So I would say that's optimum. Try not to go. Imagine if you're on 5 boards. Yeah, and 4 of them are listed companies, and the last one is non-profit. Make your own conclusions. Yeah.
Thank you, Theresa. Rahman, maybe you can shed some light on how the Mosque clusters manage this aspect of optimal board positions.
Yeah. Actually, it's quite easy for us because the policy states that you can only sit in one board at any one time. Yeah. So that makes it much easier for us. But at the same time, like what you mentioned earlier, yeah, we do have board members who are sitting in many boards, right? So that become a challenge in a sense that how well can they commit to the board that they've been appointed, especially if they're appointed as a chairperson. They may have a good resume, but for a Mosque sector, if they become a chairperson and yet he or she couldn't possibly lead well, then that can become an issue per se. So that's one. Secondly is this, I think for about getting friends and we have no issues about getting friends, but we have issues if we start getting family members to sit in the board, especially for mosques that have this legacy where it is started by a family. So that's where we become very conscious, because you want to ensure that these places of worship still remain neutral for everybody to come in. Friends, I think we will not penalize them. But one of our, for example, I just share here, one of our ways to actually test them whether he or she is coming because of the chairman, or he or she is coming because they want to serve the community, is that we always ask them, and we have this luxury. Do you mind? Do you like to be considered if we deploy you to another mosque or to another place which is the friend is not a chairman? So based on that response, we will see that we will make the judgment call whether that is one of our criteria to see whether we want to make the judgment call, whether this is just friend relationship that's why coming in, or is it something that really they want to select. I say again, for board members in the mosque, we want them in, we want to get the best out of them so that they can create impact to the community. And that is something that they have to agree when they first join the mosque sector. Yeah, so that's about all, Kitson.
Right. Thank you so much, Rahman. Now, on this similar topic, there's this interesting panel participant that asked, regarding infighting, micromanaging. I think this is maybe an overly engaged board, I guess, or even unproductive discussions by members. And of course, there's another question is, what happens when there is a crisis between board and management? So how should the CEO or the chairman reconcile or bring the board and management out of this crisis? Maybe Ellen like to share some thoughts on this?
Okay, let me try. It depends on what the crisis is all about, actually, because fundamentally, I think we have to, if a crisis should happen, we have to see whether it affects the organization as a whole, or is it a crisis between board members, or within the management itself, or between management and board. Because there are different ways of dealing with it, because anything that touches upon the organization is very, very serious. And I think everybody on board will have to come in and talk it out and see where the problem lies, how the crisis could be solved. And I think in this aspect, the chairman is very important. How the chairman perceives the problem, how the chairman handles the problem is very important, because whatever that is being decided affects the whole organization. It affects the morale as well. And it's also in this crisis situation that we see the different qualities of the board members, how they rise to the occasion to settle that crisis. And within the management itself, there could also be good staff who could come up with sensible solutions. So if it's anything to do with the management of the board itself, then I think everybody on board has to come in and talk honestly with each other. There will, of course, be unpleasant things being said. There will be criticisms. There will be accusations and things like that. If there are misunderstandings, it can be cleared if everybody is there to clear the misunderstanding. If it is a mismanagement, then of course it's a very serious problem, because then what sort of mismanagement are we talking about? Is it something that the board can handle, or must it be passed on to a higher authority outside of the organization? For instance, if it's anything to do with funds, if it is misbehavior, misconduct, and things like that. Again, what is that nature of that misconduct? If it impacts upon the whole organization, then hard decisions will have to be taken. Can we drop the person? Even if dropping the person, what must be done to salvage the reputation or the credibility of the board itself? And I always think that if it's something that involves external parties, like for instance, we have to make a report, COC to the police or whatever, it has to be done. Because at least that is where the transparency comes in as well, that a problem has happened, it impacts upon the organization, it impacts upon the trust and the confidence that the public has upon the organization. Something has to be done, and the authorities have to know about it. And whoever is responsible, take that responsibility and have it solved. That's my take for this. Thanks, Kitson.
Okay. So if I can say something, since the word crisis is used, I would say that it's an extreme word, meaning a totally different spectrum. Probably a lot of things that Alan has suggested has already been tried. And the board and management no longer can even communicate. That's why it's a crisis situation. I think this calls for a third-party intervention, an independent party intervention. So of course, the chair will have the responsibility to bring the board back to stable state, and the board meaning also key members of the management. Talk to CNPL, do a pulse check, work with a commissioner office, assume good intent. Assume good intent. That's very important. Nobody is to be punished without the investigations, and the conclusions can come later. But if it is a crisis and nothing can be salvaged, go for third-party intervention.
Right. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Theresa. Yes, Chee Meng, you have something to add. Yes.
Hey, couple of things. You take one step back. We talk about whose responsibility is it to drive board engagement. When Theresa did her presentation, obviously it has to be on the theory part of it, because you have to know the pros and cons. at the end of the day, in the commercial sector, there is a very strong agreement that the chair should drive the engagement, because in the commercial sector, the board actually, as a whole, collectively, is actually the boss of the CEO. And in many instances, in order to make sure both legal and in practice, that the CEO also knows the difficulties that can be encountered at the board level. In the commercial sector, very often you make the CEO a member of the board as well, so that he can participate. So these are some of the things that you have to bear in mind. In the non-profit organizations, things are a little bit different, because you want to avoid too much hands-on by the board, because the CEO has to basically run the job. And after all, the CEO is the executive, the board is not. There are times when you find the board has to be more hands-on, and that's because of the crisis and conflict. If that is a conflict, you look to your setup. Is it a company limited by guarantee? So there will be shareholders. Is it a trust? There would be a trust deed spelling out clearly who the beneficiaries are, what you can do within the trust. Let's get a little bit legal here. All I'm saying is that if there's a crisis, it cannot go on if you can't resolve it. Very often it's actually misunderstanding, in which case an external party coming in to do the appropriate dissection and all that, and to present it before you get them to sit down and talk might work. But if it cannot work, you cannot allow the crisis to continue. Either we revamp the board or we revamp management. And that's where the difficulties would be encountered. But that is also when the beneficiaries or the shareholders, depending on how you're constituted, would come in and take a decision. That's why very often you find Temasek flying in chairman, and actually they're tasked with certain things to do. So maybe I shouldn't mention Temasek. In all organizations, sometimes, Alan will agree with me, sometimes the chairman being flown in has a specific task to do, and therefore it's not a normal situation. So we have to be a bit circumspect here. What is a normal situation and what is not? In a normal situation, if there's a crisis, that's when you have to do all these things. And if you can't resolve it, then one party will have to be revamped if the other party is more right than wrong. And it goes back to the mission of the non-profit organization.
Thank you, Chee Meng, for clarifying who owns board engagement, because I see a number of people are disagreeing that CEO owns the board engagement for non-profits. So I like to clarify that. Yeah, it's important that we know there is something called board dynamics, which means the chairperson in non-profits have to watch out for all the interpersonal, the group dynamics that leads to board engagement. Yeah, the board engagement plan is owned by the board. Yeah, so the chairman, so for example, in SATA, in my first meeting, I said, let's look at the board engagement plan. Let's look at what the board is going to be doing for the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. 6 board meetings, this is our quorum. This is the regularity of the meetings. We have 4 community health events, which are big events because either the ministers or the MPs are attending. So we need a number of board members to be present who would like to be involved. Yeah, then in between all this, we have monthly walkabouts, yeah, active aging centers, our community hubs. Which board member would like to be involved in all these walkabouts? Yeah, and of course the chair don't have all these details. The CEO has all these details, yeah. So the CEO creates the plan. The chair brings it out during the meeting and say, board, are you agreeable to do this? Yeah, and board say, yes, okay, great, we have a plan. Now, a few months later, one board member doesn't turn up, commits to turn up. Who is responsible? Of course, the CEO would go to the board member and say, hey, what happened? Why you didn't turn up? And if it's a small matter, fine. But if the board member snaps at the CEO and say, what, you have no control over me, CEO will go to the chair, and the chair will then go to the board member and say, hey, you committed to something, you didn't deliver. What's up? Let me hear your story. Yeah, and then the board will bring the chair will bring the board member and the CEO together and say, hey, it's a misunderstanding or really something, it's a code of conduct matter. If it's a code of conduct matter, then more serious conversations have to take place. Feedback is given, highlighted to NOMSCOM, and the chair will monitor the change in behavior. Yeah, so I hope that tells you about ownership and roles. Yeah, who basically drives the engagement plan? It's the CEO, but the chair is responsible for ensuring the board dynamics work properly to support the engagement plan. And in the commercial sector, yes, the chair owns board engagement because most commercial chairs, even though they are non-executives, somehow they are seen to be executives as well. Yeah, so there is a huge responsibility there. For non-profits, a lot of chairs work like executives, but that's not expected of them. They just do it from the goodness of their heart. Yeah, because they really want the charity to do well. Yeah, but that doesn't become governance. Okay, I hope that clears some of the misunderstanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theresa Chee Meng. Well, in this panel, we have discussed, I'm very cautious of time, and in this panel, we've discussed about board appointments, recruitment, the composition, the dynamics, as well as the engagement. I see there are many questions on this engagement, but unfortunately, we are unable to cover this topic in today's session, but we will attempt to answer these questions offline, right? But before we end off this panel discussion, maybe let's hear just one tip from each of our esteemed panelists on how to engage our boards more effectively. I know Theresa has shared a lot this morning, but just one real life tip, short, sweet. Yeah, maybe let's hear from Rahman, then Chee Meng, Ellen, then Theresa. All right, Rahman?
Yeah, for me, it's board members are people. So if we treat them and we talk to them like another person, then things can work out to me. So that is where I thought that relationship is very critical and very important. So that will actually facilitate a lot of the other things that we want to do. So I think that's just what I like to share to end it off.
Thank you, Rahman. Maybe let's hear from Chee Meng.
Okay, and then we have to go on to Elena. Can't let her get away. Okay, my one tip is this. Feedback is important to encourage engagement. You might want to get an independent party who can donate the time to your organization to do feedback for you. So in the commercial world, we call it board evaluation. I would suggest you don't go and use checklists and things like that, which is so impersonal. Sometimes a phone call on the interview on board evaluation for this independent party who can ask the right questions and provide feedback to the CEO and the chairman jointly at the dissection of the result would be useful, I feel. So I'll just stop there. Ellen.
Wow, very tough when all of you have already expounded on all the good points. But I just want to share that it would be good if the board, especially the chair, can go to ground zero. Forget about where you come from, forget about your own qualifications, whatever, or that you are a chair of the board. You are there because you are supposed to bring everybody together and therefore be inclusive in all that you do, accept all ideas and suggestions to distill the best ideas from them, because everybody is looking for the good of the organization, and be willing to play subordinate roles as well, because being chair doesn't mean that you are always doing the leading roles, because I also think that the best leader is the one who is able to stand behind and let other people lead you as well. That's all I have to share. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to summarize by talking about employee engagement. All of you are familiar with employee engagement. What does that mean? It means the personal mission of the employee is aligned with the organizational mission. which means they're aligned in purpose, right? So same for boards. If the personal mission of a board member, the collective mission of the board is aligned with the organizational mission, then you have board engagement. Yeah, so I hope to simplify it by relating it to employee engagement. It's the same thing, no difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you so much, Chee Meng. And thank you so much, Rahman, for being with us this morning. Of course, we have learned a fair bit, especially your last few tips about engagement, ground zero, feedback, and also seeing them as a person. I think these are very, very valuable insights to a more effective board management. So it has been really an interactive and engaging session today. So once again, on behalf of the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, a part of NVPC, we'd like to express our thanks and appreciation to all our panelists, and of course, our Commissioner of Charities, Mr. Desmond Chin, and the team for joining us this morning. Well, I stand between you and lunch. So before I close off, just like to share with all charities to continue to approach CNPL. We are here to journey with all charities. We do have our board match program in the event that you require, board appointment services. And of course, we also have our this board pulse or pulse check, as what we sort of rename it now, to actually help you to strengthen your board diagnostics and board capability processes. All right, and of course, we will continue to bring more Board Connect series for our charities. All right. So of course, with all the safe management measures in place, we are unable to bring you live to NVPC, but now, nevertheless, we are happy to have these sessions for all charities. All right, just be reminded, we do have an upcoming leadership conversation on Friday, 18th of June, and the topic would really be on women in leadership. And the guest of honor will be MOS Sun Xueling, who is also a Minister of State for Education, as well as for the Ministry of Social and Family Development. So we invite you to join us as well. All right, so till we meet again, take care, stay safe, and hope to see you in person really soon. Have a great lunch. Have a great week ahead. I don't care.